Let's do it.
All right, episode three, three questions with the president. It is fight week. I guess the first question that comes to play: what the hell happens on fight week, man? Is it craziness every single fight card, or tell me about this fight week itself? Like, what's going on? We're at Tuesday. The fights are on Thursday. Obviously, medicals are probably, hopefully, done by now. Weigh-ins tomorrow. Fight night Thursday. What's the week looking like for you?
So you should probably ask that question tomorrow because usually a lot of the bad stuff happens after the weigh-ins, right? But as a promoter on the regional scene, you probably want to book double the number of fights that you want to have. So we learned that after doing 10 events, if we want to have 12 fights, we book 24. So that usually works out. We book 24 fights. We end up between 9 to 13. This time we booked 24. Now we have 18. So it's going to be a long night, which is good. Like a lot of guys get to compete. So we're just going to have um, a good flow, go fast, don't waste too much time between the fights. And we got 12 pro fights, all really, every single one of the pro fights and even the amateur fights, they're all very meaningful fights. So um, we set up the cage today. The cage is set up, everything is set up. So we got the weigh-ins tomorrow between 2 to 4 p.m. and it could be our greatest event yet. We gotta
Other than like the fact that there's 18 fights, other than the fact that you have to worry about, maybe these guys might not make weight and the fights not might not happen. What other craziness goes down on fight week then? Obviously, actually, let me say this. Obviously, last card, we had a kidnapping occur. That has to be one of the craziest things that happened. A guy coming from Mexico got kidnapped on the taxi ride to the airport. Like, there is craziness that happens.
Well, that happened, but on the same card also we had Rohovic and Jamie Siraj. They came, they made weight. They faced. Well, we changed the weight at the weigh-in because Rohovic looked a little bit sick. We moved it up a pound and a half. They interviewed. They talked about the fight. Then Rohovic got sick, went to the hospital. So I mean, that's something that happens a lot of times. Guys come in, drown out. You know, I don't know. I still think, in my opinion, uh, on the regional scene where guys are not making a living off their fight paycheck, they shouldn't be making the UFC cut. That's my opinion, and I've always been against the massive weight cut on the regional scene.
Were there any fights on this card that you were like worried about the weight cut and people not making weight?
Well, Brandon Breglio fight, we weren't worried about him making the weight because he's made 125 before, but he kind of made a request if he could move it up to 130. We asked his opponent, they were okay, so we moved that up. That could have been problematic if he wasn't vocal about it ahead of time, and he would have tried to make the weight and got sick. So I'm glad he did that. Um, we'll see. I mean, Radley is always, he's made 145 before, but recently he's been at 55, so he's going to 45. That's always a challenge. Gagan is a big guy going down to 45 for the first time in a long time. That could be problematic. I mean, those are a lot of things we're keeping an eye on. So we just got to wait and see what happens tomorrow, right? Fingers crossed.
And those are two big fights that you hope obviously play out. The next question then that I have is, over the course of your tenure as president of Battlefield Fight League, then what is the one fight cancellation that happened? On the tip of your head, I guess, the one fight cancellation that happened that you wish didn't fall through and you were able to have go through and you guys were able to promote.
Well, first of all, this is year 14, not 10, but anyways, that
True, true.
in terms of like there is no fight. Like you always want to have all the fights because it's just what guys put into the camp. It's just so unfair to them and their opponents, especially when they get sick at the weigh-in. But I would probably say There's a lot, but if I gotta name four or five, Ash versus Leo, we wanted to have that one. Both guys, like that was at a time it made a lot of sense to have that fight. Ash got like something to do with his kidneys, had to go to the hospital. That was a big fight at the time. Off the top of my head, um, that's something I remember because I remember how sick he got. We had Taylor Christopher recently. He was supposed to fight McKinday. McKinday got sick at the weigh-ins, and obviously Surrey City first time he was supposed to fight Ali. Ali came, made weight, then he got hospitalized. So I mean, those are all. There's so many times it's happened. That would be a whole show by itself.
Yeah, and obviously this last card as well, with you saying, Jamie and Ryan Rohovich. That's probably one that everyone would have liked to see with the bad blood between those two. Okay, question number 3, and then I have a bonus one after this question. Then, number 3, Thursday night, Battlefield Fight League 79. What's your pick for fight of the night?
Oh boy, that's a that's well depends. Like if you're a grappling fan, or because it seems like a lot of time people don't appreciate the jiu-jitsu, and always the fight of the night ends up being like when it's a good boxing or a kickboxing match, right? So if you're going based off what the industry standard is for fight of the night, you would probably think it would be Gio versus Victor to start off the main card, or sorry, Mitch versus Victor, or Gagan versus Caleb, because both guys are well rounded, but they both stand. So those two, or Radley versus Maxime. The first 2 minutes of that fight is going to tell us about how that fight's going to end up playing out.
Definitely. All right, bonus question for you. This past Friday night, Samurai MMA 9 went down. Dejan Kajic, amazing performance in the main or co-main event, whatever you want to call it, however that one played out. But he ended up getting his hand raised. What were your thoughts on the event as a whole? What were your thoughts on Dejan in that matchup? And are there any guys from the East Coast that you saw that you would love to bring out to BC to fight for Battlefield?
Um, well, first off, Dan didn't look as good as he usually does because you gotta. I understand, like his opponent took the fight on 4 days, but Dan had his opponent changed. That was the third opponent, and he also 3 days out thought he was not fighting, but then he was supposed to fight at 175, and then he had to cut and make 170 when he was already had stopped cutting. So it looked like he was running on fumes in that fight after the first round. That's what it like. Of course, he got the job done. He hit him with big shots. He's a better technical fighter. Of course, he was going to win that fight, but he's usually a lot better than that. Guys, I mean, that Samurai show for a UFC Fight Pass debut card, it was they aced it. I mean, if you look at the production, the pacing, everything, like it takes you time to learn. It looked like they did it right. So in terms of like production value, I would give it 100%. There wasn't any mistakes on that card. At the beginning it started off a bit slow, like the fights were all going to a decision, but then Alex Morgan came in and capped it off. So they got kind of the way that main event went, it made up for everything. Guys from the East Coast, off the top of my head, just kind of recency bias because they had a featherweight main event. We have a featherweight main event. Obviously, if Maxime wins, he can't fight guys from TriStar. But I mean, just imagine right now in Canada, number one guy in rankings is Alex Morgan. After that, then they have Matteo Vogel, number two. Number three is the Samurai champ, Frederick. I mean, just think of the possibilities. Radley wins. You could always do Radley versus Alex Morgan or Frederick. If Maxime wins, then he would probably fight the winner of Caleb or Gagan. But there's a lot of guys from the East Coast, West Coast, like in different weight classes. Samurai is a deep roster that now we can have those fights and say, hey, let's see who's better, right? If guys are to fight East versus West, like you can kind of use guys from each other's roster to get the fights that fans want to see. That's I think we could see that in 2024.
That's awesome, especially here in Canada. Like, yeah, obviously, Canadian fans, we love that East versus West rivalry. All right, that's three. Battlefield Fight League 79 goes down Thursday night live on UFC Fight Pass. Jay, anything else you want to mention before I let you go here?
Well, yeah, question for you. 12 pro fights, but what's kind of being overlooked here is the prelims, right? So we got um, headlined by Guzman versus Jada Martin. Guzman has fought as heavy as a heavyweight.
Yeah.
Um, how do you think that fight plays out, knowing the way Jaden fights?
We haven't seen Jaden for a while. Obviously, you know the guy. I told him actually about a week ago that I hope that a week out he's walking around in bubble wrap because I want to see him hit the cage on Thursday night because the amount of injuries that guy's had over the course of his career, and I mean not very many pro fights. The guy is a legit samurai, though, man. Like his striking is as crisp as they come. His cardio is fantastic. I've never seen this other guy, his style, but I'm guessing he's like a flurry haymaker kind of guy. I know he's got knockouts, and as you said, he's fought as heavy as heavyweight. But Jaden's just a beast, and if I can't see him losing this fight.
Okay, so undercard we have him. We have Adam Posner versus a
Yeah, don't even
tough.
get me started on that one. I think Adam's on a whole nother level, man. This kid's gonna be a champion in Battlefield within this calendar year, I think.
So, but we also have ASO standout wrestler and Brandon Breglio. So between those, and they all have tough fights. Who
Yeah,
do you think? Which fight do you think will steal the undercard portion of the card?
I think Adam steals it. I hate to. I don't want to. Like those are three big fights. I think Adam is going to showcase just another level here, and I don't think people. Obviously, we saw his jiu-jitsu game, and we know that's fantastic under Matt Kwan and all that kind of stuff. But his striking doesn't get enough credit, and I think that if we see him being able to put that striking on notice, I think he's just gonna. I don't know. This kid could finish the fight in 10, 15, 30 seconds, or he could make it a damn night for his opponent.
Gio, like everybody, he's fighting a tough guy because just because his opponent is from Mexico, people are not under. He's facing a wrestler,
Yeah.
right? His opponent is a wrestler, so that could this could be a fight that he has to answer a lot of the question marks that we've been waiting for him to answer because his opponent is not the type of guy who's going to stand with him.
Well, we saw what happened with Gio in fights where it hasn't been finished in the first minute, 2 minutes. He's sort of gone erratic and the pace has slowed down for him. The gas tank wasn't necessarily there. So I'm thinking that over the course of the last year or two, he's figured that stuff out. And I think that it'll be a different game plan. I think he's working with different guys these days. He's going to be able to put his whole tools or his whole tool belt on display on Thursday night, and I can see him withstanding the wrestling. If it does go to the mat, who the heck knows? We've never really seen Gio off his back.
Yeah, exactly. And then the eight main card fights. Obviously, we've talked a lot about Victor Mitch,
Yeah.
and then after that is Nick and Benuelas, right? Then it's Gio, then it's Gagan, then it's Navid facing a undefeated 3-0 fighters. How do you think he does against a better stand-up fighter than he faced last time?
That's where things get interesting, right? Because Navid, he was getting picked apart in that last fight. A little bit on the feet. He got rocked a couple times. Then the fight hit the canvas. The guy tries to throw in a buggy choke, and that was the end of his night because he obviously went to sleep, which was crazy. Because I actually leaned over after the fight was over and I asked John Cooper. I said, "Is that legal, man? Like he's allowed to slam like that or spike like that?" And he's like, "So long as the submission's locked in, it's legal." And I didn't actually know that. And I don't know, Navid. It's going to be interesting if this guy's able to touch him up because I think if his opponent can stay to the outside and just pick him apart from the outside, it could be a long night for Navid. But a lot of people, there was the stat that you put out there that Navid, despite that setback, could be potentially en route to contender series or something like that within the 2025, maybe early 2025, late 2024, with another dominant performance. it's tough to say because he's got to be able to close the distance. And is he going to be able to against the guy with striking if the guy's striking is able to be set from the outside? Like these guys that are able to pick guys apart, like Jaden, I feel like is a guy that could literally stay along the outside of the cage against his opponent and just boom, boom, pitter patter from the outside, right? So these guys, if they're able to close the distance on a guy like, or I mean Naveed, if he's able to close the distance on a guy like this, then it could be a long night for his opponent. But it could also be the opposite if the guy is able to keep the distance.
Now, obviously, one more fight, two more. We got obviously Rodrigo versus Scotty Stockman.
I don't know a lot about Scotty, but I mean, American wrestler fought PFL Challenger Series. He's got a lot of stock under his belt. But Rodrigo shocked the hell out of us when he fought Saeed. I don't think anyone was expecting that. I don't even know if Rodrigo was expecting that. But we thought he was a jiu-jitsu guy. We thought he was going to get in there. We thought he was going to. Well, we know Saeed has a great wrestling game, but put him on his back and who knows? But Saeed has good jiu-jitsu too. So Rodrigo able to stifle him, not just with wrestling, but also on the feet and land bombs from the outside. Yes, they were haymakers and thrown wildly, but he was able to catch Saeed, which not a lot of people do because Saeed's a nut and able to get stuff done. But this guy, this American that he's fighting, has a lot of skills. And if he can put Rodrigo on his back, Rodrigo's going to have to showcase that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and try to work off his back. So that's where things get interesting is like, where does this fight really take place? Because swinging big haymakers, this guy's a wrestler and he's going to be able to shoot under those haymakers and take Rodrigo down. So if he's able to keep him on his back and not let his hips move, it's the American could take this one.
And Ty Wilson, he's fought Cole Smith here before, three-fight winning streak. Going versus Ali, who's only lost since 2018 is to Surrey.
Yeah.
Right now, they got it ranked number two in Canada. So this fight means so much to both guys because how do you think that goes?
Well, we didn't get to see a lot out of Ty Wilson when he fought Cole because Cole was just on a whole nother level back then. Submitted him rear naked choke, I think, very, very early. Ty came into BC and got sent out of BC as quick as he got here. This one's a different story. He went back to the drawing board. He figured some things out. He's got great jiu-jitsu. It's very tough. Ali's got very underrated jiu-jitsu as well. And I don't know how I was not impressed by Ty in that performance, obviously against Cole. I watched some of his other performances and like he's got a well-rounded game. It just depends on which Ty Wilson shows up to the cage that night, I think. Ali is on every night. His only losses came in championship fights against guys who arguably are much better than he was at the time. They moved on. They went to the UFC Contender Series and the Octagon itself. So to say Ali is number two in Canada is really, I mean, like I can't see him losing this fight. I can't see. I don't know. I think Ty might be a little bigger than him though. But has that ever really mattered? I mean, other than Matteo Vogel, who's bigger than a lot of his opponents.
Yeah, I think it's well, Ali's the reason he wasn't he's not in the contender yet is because he's been working on his striking to catch up to his grappling.
Yeah.
So that might come into play here because Ty might decide to keep this fight standing. That just depending how the
Ali's
game
never
plan.
had a tough time taking guys down. His wrestling was stifled in those championship fights, but that was against guys who I guess both of them were a little bigger than he was, and their wrestling was just that much better than his. He's got a style of wrestling that comes. It's a jiu-jitsu style wrestling where when he takes you down, he's looking to submit you, and he can submit you from various angles. We saw that with that upside down reverse inverted triangle that he landed, which was crazy. I think that Yeah, even if he has to strike, he utilizes his strikings to get his takedowns, and his takedowns come so fast. I think speed might play a difference in this fight.
I think we touched on every fight. I mean, the Nicolette Banuelos fight is a given. Like Nick is going to be better on the ground. Banuelos has got to keep it standing to have any kind of chance. And Victor and Mitch, I think Mitch kind of has to wrestle in that fight to get his hand raised because Victor is just too much of a veteran on the feet.
Again, like I was saying with dictating the distance is where Mitch has to play this one. He could get into a dirty boxing situation where he's close and inside, maybe up against the cage, and like again, dirty boxing situation, closing the distance a little bit where he's just inside his range, so it's not long, crisp strikes from Victor. I think that's the way Mitch can get the job done. Again, like you said, wrestling. The other fight that you were speaking about was which one?
And Nick and
Yeah, Nick. I think, I think Nick must probably. I guarantee you, Nick actually learned from his last fight that not to blow his load in the first round. He looked fantastic in that fight in the first round, and then just put too much effort into it. If we see this one get into the second round, I can't see Nick gassing, but I don't think it will get to the second round, if you ask me. I think if this fight hits the canvas the way Nick wants it to, his jiu-jitsu is just on a whole nother level. I don't think anyone outside of what we saw with Maxime is going to be able to get away from that jiu-jitsu.
yeah, so we got three title fights: Navid versus undefeated opponent, Gagan versus Caleb, Gio versus a 3-on-1 wrestler, Nicolette versus Banuelos, and of course, Mikta and Vish to start off the main card. And then you got Adam Posner, Jaden Martin, Brandon Riglow, Aso Polini, and the amateur on the card. It could end up being the biggest card we've ever had because it is absolutely stacked.
And not just stacked, but like the matchmaking in terms of caliber of opponents is fantastic as well. Like you said, a lot of these are pick'em fights. Despite the odds maybe swaying one way or the other, with the fact that we know that some of these guys are huge favorites on the local scene, the matchmaking was fantastic. I'm actually even excited for, the post limb fights because Alvarez, that kid making his debut with you guys, he's got a name under his belt, dressing up like Deadpool and whatnot and training with Josh Kwiatkowski. Like, that kid could be another guy that Battlefield builds up from the ground up and sort of blows up on your guys' radar. And that fight doesn't even happen until, if we get all 18 fights, happen until
And
after
he's
the
starting
main
to
card.
fight. He's fighting Val. We saw him earlier fight Dennis Gang's guy. Like
Yeah,
he could actually steal the show. Like those amateur guys they're all close fights, right?
yeah,
They're all good. They've been here before, and they want to steal the show, right?
exactly. I'm excited, man. Thursday night, 2 nights away. Let's hope the weigh-ins go well. Jay, thanks. This was a long one, but we got into a lot this time.
Awesome. I'll see you on Thursday night.
Sounds good, buddy. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.